Consumption, and this is functional. In fact, they limit consumers because if you have no money and prices are high, you cannot buy it. Thus, regulation of the consumption process is carried out through prices. Therefore, we need to set the task of nullifying the error vector, that is, the task of nullifying the price prescribant. Let's remember Stalin again. What was it like during Stalin's time? As Vysotsky sang, there was a time when prices were lowered while wages were increasing. And this is something that many laugh at, but it is a serious matter. What does our party's program say? We put forward the task of continuously raising wages and simultaneously lowering prices. And if, as is the case now, both prices are rising and wages are increasing, then nothing really changes. Wages have been raised, but prices have jumped several times. Therefore, in an ideal regime, which is not so easy to achieve, prices should be equal to zero. We breathe air, meaning there is no shortage. But already in Japan, when there was pollution, I remember a few years ago, they sell respirators and oxygen tanks. If you want to breathe in a gas-filled environment, buy air. That is, where there is a shortage, there is a price. If there is no shortage, there is no price. Therefore, if we live in harmony with nature, with clean air and water from a stream, everything will be fine and there will be no prices. But this, of course, is a big flight of fancy for the current stage of societal development. In general, we should strive for this in a biologically acceptable environment and so on. Therefore, the state plan is not a significant height that must be jumped over in any way, but an absolutely critical threshold that cannot be allowed to fall below, based on the demographic needs of humanity. Well, here these formulas clarify this. Thesis that the state plan should not be a height to be reached. And in fact, we come to a simple conclusion that is understandable even without any formulas. The plan is essentially an aspiration, while production is a reality. And they can be mathematically related to each other. If we mathematically correlate this in natural quantities, that is, in the volumes of production of goods and services, we will have a complete picture, while prices can be misleading. In terms of prices, a certain industry may seem unnecessary because it is expensive, but its products are vital for all other industries. And if it does not function, then there will be a self-dissolution of the entire national economy or subordination of the national economy to what systems? Other foreign ones. What is actually happening in our country gradually, slowly, but now not slowly, but at a rapid pace. Therefore, summarizing what we have said, the knowledge of macroeconomic systems leads us again to the conclusion that from the position of a sufficiently general theory of management, what should be, there must be a vector of goals, which means the vector of goals should be oriented towards achieving a demographically determined spectrum of needs. Why exactly this one and not a degrading parasitic one? To ensure that the super system reproduces sustainably. Compare this with the processes occurring in super systems. Thus, the demographically determined spectrum of needs interference must be suppressed. Then the national economy will function sustainably, without fluctuations. Why? Because focusing on demographically determined needs is a predictable object of management, and managing an unpredictable object is fundamentally impossible. Therefore, this ensures the stability of the entire national economic complex. Now, dear listeners, we will, in a comprehensive manner, briefly justify the mechanism of the functioning of the credit and financial system, how it works, and explain what needs to be done to ensure it operates normally. The discussion will be about the theory of similarity of macroeconomic systems. What is the essence of the theory of similarity? You all know the theory of similarity from, for example, a geographical map. It is there on a geographical map. Here is the beautiful planet Earth, and it is indeed represented on the map as a magnificent image to scale. This is also similarity, meaning that certain processes exist. They are scaled and represented graphically. But in more detail, for example, an airplane, when new ships are created, first of all, they create a detailed and comprehensive model of the airplane. They place it in a wind tunnel. the fan spins, the airflow goes, the model of the airplane hangs on suspensions. There are sensors on it, and 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 there are sensors on it, measuring the aerodynamic parameters of the aircraft, or if it concerns a ship or submarine, the parameters of the submarine or ship in the sea, which is actually done in a pool, measuring various indicators. That is, first a certain model is created, which is tested, and then once the tests are conducted, it can all be implemented on a larger scale. And why not? Perhaps create a mathematical model, potentially in order to better understand the complex nature of such a macroeconomic system. That is, generally speaking, a mathematician allows, that is, it is not necessarily in altered scalable sizes, everything can be measured mathematically. How much product should come in, how much should go out, and so on. That is, it is possible to develop a mathematical model that would describe the functioning of macroeconomic systems. The question is, can such a model be made? You won't find it in any textbook. And we have a question: why does our economic science not deal with such things? And how can this be done? This can be done by developing a dimensionless credit and financial system. And in the concept of public safety, this has been done, generally speaking. It has been done in the concept of public safety. And here is just what has been done. There is a control object, which is the exchange product. There is a subject of control that manages this exchange product with the help of what? Financial circulation. That is, we have confirmed that there is the exchange product, and in the opposite direction, money circulates, which functions in the credit and financial system as a whole. And there must be a correspondence between the commodity mass and the money. Therefore, with the help of loans, grants, subsidies, that is, through the management mechanism, financial circulation is maintained, which is the means of managing the exchange product. So what method is used? Look, a nominal amount of money is indicated through P and T, but this T denotes that a certain company or individual has a certain amount of money. Here I have 100 rubles and Abramovich has 1 billion or something. A certain company has approximately $1 million, and so on. That is, there are these elements, people, legal entities, and individuals, and each of them has a nominal amount of money. C is the current total solvency, provided that the credit debt is fully repaid, that is, without taking interest into account. K is the total volume of distributed credit, loans in total, and then what do we exactly receive? If we add up all the payments, that is the money I have. For Abramovich and someone else, if we add it all together, we will get the total amount of payments. And this total amount of payments will be equal to the total solvency plus the total volume of issued credit loans. Such a formula. Here, as they say, everything is clear. And then what do we get? Then if S plus K is divided by S plus K, what do we get? We get 1. And then, that is, we dimensionless, that is, leveled out rubles, dollars, yen, pfennig, and so on, discarded everything and reduced it all to 100%. Figuratively speaking, here is 1. And then it turns out that PT divided by S plus K will always be less than 1, or 100%. That is, some part. This is the specific solvency of each particular individual or legal entity. Here is the specific payment capacity from the total overall payment capacity. Here is the specific payment capacity of each individual element, Ivanov, Sidorov, Abramovich, Rothschild, and so on. If it concerns the entire planet, it changes due to what? From the transactions between these elements, that is, someone was paid, someone was given credit, something else, the emission activities of the Treasury, that is, the change in this S, the current total solvency, and the credit activities of banks, K, that is, banks also give loans, so they change all of this. That is, it changes. How does it change? I once gave a lecture in Voronezh. It was 1996 to the directors, the red directors. And when I got to this pit, Was surprised these directors said, "Man, this is already very complicated." That is, they forgot how to operate with fractions, how they are added, multiplied. That is, they got used to the fact that the state gives them money from the budget for rocket production, control systems, and they spend it as they wish. But to think about how there wasn't really enough brain power, you know. Why did I tell this? I had to draw this diagram after talking with the red directors. What is drawn here? If you add all the pits together, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is it, then you will get one. This one. And then, based on specific payment capacity, look at what happens with lending. That this is legalized theft. Imagine we are all sitting around a pie at the table. This pie represents all the wealth that we can buy with our monetary unit. I have 100 rubles. That person has this much. That is, each of us has separate payment capacity. Now, those with a little money can cut themselves a small piece of the pie. Those with a lot of money can cut themselves a big piece of the pie. But it is important to understand that each person possessing a certain amount with specific payment capacity can count on their piece of the pie. Now, what is happening? We are sitting, and two of us are making a deal between themselves. That is, one lends the other 1,000 rubles, and the latter signs on paper that he will return 1,200. What have we done? We increased the total amount of money by 200 rubles. The deal was made by two involved parties, but the specific payment capacity of each diminished slightly. That is, after making this deal, I will cut myself a little more piece of the pie. Rather, I will cut myself a piece of the pie that is a little smaller than I could have done before. We made another deal which is good for 200 rubles. It's just a crumb of everything. And if million or billion significant transactions are made between banks, they substantially increase the money supply, thereby reducing our purchasing power. This means we can acquire less. What is this? This is called legalized theft. That's it. And theft, generally speaking, is prosecuted under the criminal code by the laws of all countries. This certainly serves as the foundation for what, you might wonder. This is a refusal to pay our states all those interest payments on the loans that our brainless leaders have accumulated. Why? Because paying off the loan debt means paying the thief for what he stole from us. Can you imagine all religions of all countries in the world? All according to, and therefore all religions of all countries, all legislations of all countries consider theft illegal, prosecuting under criminal law. Therefore, a simultaneous refusal on a global scale by all countries and peoples to pay these mafia clans interest on previously issued loans would be quite normal. And therefore, when some are surprised by one of the programmatic provisions of our party, the conceptual party of unity, you see what it is based on. That is, in fact, usury has grown from the law of Moses, not allowing one's brother to lend either silver or bread. Who is this? Moses supposedly spoke on behalf of the Lord God. That cannot be. God is not such a bad person as to instill such abominations. This is what the discussion is about. Moreover, if we go further, I think it is clear that the whole focus of this disproportionate credit and financial system is that it is impossible to compare it in numbers. And by removing the dimensions, that is, reducing all these pfennigs, liras, yen, rubles, and dollars to 100% in this form, everything becomes clear and falls into place. Therefore, indeed, the change in S plus and its dynamics depend on many factors. From the activities of creditors, from the activities of bankers, from the activities of directors, and from many other things. But the most crucial thing is that, in essence, it changes during production and affects the solvency of various sectors. That is, if you, for example, decided to do something serious, large, like a factory. At this moment, you know what the pricing policy is, what the loans are, what the interest rates are, that is everything. You started doing this, you made calculations based on one situation, and after 6 months the situation changed qualitatively. Well, for example, like with Kirienko's default bank crash, and you went bankrupt. That is, the credit and financial system has transitioned to something else. The Kinder Surprise showed us by Kirienko. You expected one thing, but you have something completely different. Therefore, there is no stability. This situation explains why entrepreneurs are not currently investing money in long cycles, in the production of complex mechanisms, and so on. Those who have already created it are doing it. And those who haven't say, why should I try to produce movie cameras better than those in Japan? Won't have time. And it's not just that I won't have time. Maybe there are ideas. But while you are doing this, perhaps the dynamics of S Plus are changing. How are they changing? Under whose leadership? And now you understand, we have already gone through this, including the Rothschild fixing, politics, including whose priorities are generalized resources. By the way, this is the foolishness manifested by our sociologists and political scientists, economists too. We need to focus on the economy. It's foolishness. Politics is over there. But it turns out that the dollar exchange rate depends on the war. From the statement of some politician, even our Putin spoke during negotiations with Nazarbayev, commented on Lukoil, and the stocks immediately rose by 25%. So what happened? Did the pump stop extracting oil, or did they start extracting it faster? Then it turns out that all of this has a significant impact on the general functioning of the economy. And overall, it affects the economy in various ways. And our economists say that it doesn't work that way. The economy itself must be economical. And some entrepreneurs say that we need to focus on the economy. Forget it, I am out of politics. Changes in the credit and financial system. In economic relations, in oil prices depend on whether the king married the princess and divorced. It turns out they depend on that. Is it really so difficult to understand such things? Everything is obvious. These priorities of generalized resources simply put everything in its place. The point is to understand what the economy is, these priorities of generalized resources. Therefore, the dynamics of change in C plus K is a pressing factor over Industry 1 in the production of combines, and over Industry 2, agriculture, and over Industry N, the space industry. Here I am from the space industry. Was it bad for us? No. It was one of the best industries. The American shuttle flies while our Baran was turned into a bar. Why? It's called competition. And we are told that there was no money. How could there be no money? There are so many forests, you can make as much paper as you want. And this is global policy implemented through what? Including, again, recalling the priorities. So, let's summarize what has been said. Here are the interest payments on the loan. And this is a specific case when this delta C is less than 0. The credit institution with interest in an unbounded credit financial system. From a mathematical perspective, this is a non-zero sum game. If someone doesn't know mathematics, everyone knows football. In the credit system, from a mathematical perspective, this is a non-zero sum game. If someone doesn't know math, everyone knows football. From the athlete's view, if someone doesn't know math, from the athlete's view, if someone doesn't know math, everyone knows football. From the athlete's view, the credit institution is like a game on a football field one way. That is, you have a goal, but your opponent, the creditor, has no goal. And no matter how well you play, you will absolutely never score a goal against him because he is simply an incredible player who truly has no goal. When you get tired, the corner will still score. By the way, that's how Ford was broken. He tried to create a state within a state in the United States. They started showing films where his cars suffered disasters, accidents, and breakdowns. And Ford's cars stopped being bought. His solvency and the company's capacity were not there, but the cars were not being purchased. He was forced to submit to this international Jewish mafia, although he spoke out against it. They broke him through films. Therefore, the win here is always predetermined for the creditor. Here is this formula. K divided by C plus K is always less than K with interest divided by C plus K. That is, the win is always predetermined for the creditor. It is clear that interest eats away at solvent demand and makes it impossible to sell any part of the product because those who would like to buy do not have money. If interest indeed reaches housing and food, then it is already a weapon of genocide. On a global scale, this is carried out under the guidance of transnational banking clans and their occult masters. Here is an interesting diagram that visually shows how all this is done. Look, as you can see, here are the various households, producer and also the seller. Here they function. This is indeed the market of the production sphere, and this is the market of paid consumption. This is society, the buyer of the final product. And here's what happens. How does the money come in? The buyer purchases in the production market. Here he receives a salary from the production market. With this salary he buys products. This is how money circulates here. So what I told you, goods and services, and money flows in the opposite direction. And here sits, you see, a red bug, drunk on blood. Banker lender, what does he do? Look, he gives a loan to the producer here, 1,000 rubles, and he sucks back 1,200. Gave $1 million, but sucks back 1,200,000. In other words, a bloodsucker. Money constantly flows to him. It's all very simple. There should be exactly as much money as there are goods and services, and banks are needed. Let there be banks, but let them lend like they do in Japan. In Japan, banks lend at 0% interest. That is, whatever you give, that's what you take back. And at whose expense? Bank employees buy money and they right over here into production. The bank is an element of production. And in Japan, there are 6 large financial industrial groups, which also have banks, but they lend at 0 interest rates. And in China, it is observed that lending rates in some cases reach negative values. State banks give a peasant just 100 yen, and the peasant returns 90 after a year. Why? We already discussed this a few minutes ago. Not everything that is financially beneficial is appropriate for the life of society. That is, help must be provided to someone to get back on their feet. Therefore, the system of grants, subsidies, and lending can be implemented either according to this concept or that one. And that's the trick of it, you see. So what is ultimately the conclusion from this? Lending with interest as a practice should be completely and totally eradicated in our society. Because it is unnatural, it destroys the national economic complex. It allows various parasites such as bloodsuckers to thrive. Lending. At usurious interest rates, lending rates should be equal to 0. We have already asked ourselves the question of what formula is used to calculate that $1 is worth 29 rubles and 32 kopecks. And we came to the obvious conclusion that there is no such formula and there cannot be. So why? You won't find this in any textbook. Is it even possible to invent such a formula? There is no such formula now. Let's figure this out. Right now, you know that the Rothschild fixing procedures are in effect. We have examined them. And by the definition of the price of gold per troy ounce, global financial mafia manages national economic complexes. That is, it knows which elite state has started to buy gold for reserves, or conversely, the bankrupt elite spends all its gold reserves to maintain its decent standard. That is, it knows the situation in the country and by setting the price per troy ounce can regulate the prosperity or misfortune of certain countries. Previously, the gold standard was used to compare currencies, and we have also examined what it was based on. Is it possible now, as many economists say, to return to the gold standard? No, it is not possible. Why? Because previously all products were made based on human and animal muscle power, that is, biogenic forces were expended. The carpenter worked as long as he had the strength. They plowed the land with oxen, cows, and horses, and And when biogenic energy was expended on the production of goods and services, anything could be taken as an invariant in the price list. One could, as King Hammurabi tried, use grain. One could use sheep. Well, they took gold. It was already said to him, "You reap what you sow." Remember how Buratino sowed in the field of wonders, and what Fox Alice and Cat Basilio did with him. Thus the gold standard objectively died, and this mafia transitioned to fixing. Not just out of idleness, but out of desperation, because it was necessary to somehow regulate processes at the macro level. And on what basis can all this be returned? And on what basis? All goods and services are produced using electricity, relying on electricity and traction. That is, an electric pump pumps oil.